I never thought a courtroom could feel this cold. Not because of the air conditioning. It was the way the walls seemed to absorb every sound, the way each echo of the judge's gavel felt like a countdown to the end of my life as I knew it. Across the room, she sat there, my soon-to-be ex-wife, Olivia. Her legs crossed, her lips curved in that smirk she wore whenever she thought she'd won. She looked like she was waiting for a show to start, like my humiliation was the entertainment she had paid for. And maybe she had. The divorce had been messy from the start. We weren't just untangling our lives, we were burning the threads. Every conversation had turned into an argument, every memory into ammunition. But today was supposed to be the final nail in the coffin. Our lawyers sat between us, like referees who already knew the outcome of the fight. I could feel mine tense beside me, flipping through papers, highlighting lines, whispering strategies. But I wasn't really listening. My eyes were locked on her. She wore red. Of course she did. That color had always been her silent weapon, bold, unignorable, dripping with confidence. She leaned back in her chair, whispering something to her attorney, and then she laughed. Right there, in front of the judge, in front of everyone, like she knew something I didn't. It was the kind of laugh that wasn't about humor. It was about power. And it told me everything I needed to know. She thought she was walking away with everything. The house, the car, the custody arrangement, the money. Especially the money. Because what she didn't know, what no one in that courtroom knew yet, was that I had a plan. Not a petty revenge plot. Not a desperate last-minute stunt. This was something I had been building for months, maybe even years. And today, it would unfold. The judge adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began reading through the formalities. Legal jargon swirled in the air like a language meant to keep ordinary people in the dark. But I caught the shift in Olivia's posture when my attorney slid a sealed folder across the table. It landed in front of the judge with a soft thud that somehow cut through all the noise in the room. Her eyes flicked toward it. Curious, then cautious. I could feel her attention narrowing, the way a predator notices a sudden rustle in the bushes. She didn't know it yet, but the game was about to change. The judge's fingers slid over the seal before he broke it, the faint tear of the envelope sounding louder than it had any right to. Olivia tilted her head, still trying to mask her curiosity under that smug little smile. She'd been smug for months, ever since she filed first, ever since she thought she'd blindsided me. I could see the memory playing behind her eyes. The morning she served me papers. She'd worn silk pajamas, her hair perfectly tousled, sipping coffee like she'd just won a prize. She thought I'd crumble that day. She had no idea I'd been preparing long before she even dreamed of leaving. The judge scanned the first page. His brows twitched. Barely, but it was enough for my pulse to quicken. Enough to make her cross one leg over the other, the red fabric of her dress catching the courtroom's dull light like a flare. And then, that laugh again. Soft this time, almost under her breath. I swear she thought she had this in the bag, that my net worth was just another box to tick, another thing for her to bleed dry. She didn't realize what was coming. The judge cleared his throat. "Mrs. Callahan," he said, "before we proceed with the division of assets, I believe it's important you're made aware of the updated financial disclosures submitted by your husband's counsel this morning." She blinked. "Updated?" Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Your Honor, we were not informed." "That's correct," my lawyer interrupted. "Due to the sensitive nature of these assets, They were filed under seal until today. Her eyes locked on mine, and for the first time in months, the smirk faltered. Because she knew. She didn't know what, but she knew I had been holding something back. The judge's voice was steady, almost casual, as he began to read. Mr. Callahan's current total net worth stands at... The number hit the air like a thunderclap. It wasn't the figure she'd seen during discovery. It was higher, significantly higher. I watched her pupils dilate, watched her hand freeze halfway through adjusting her hair. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For once, she was speechless, and that's when I realized I'd already won. Not the case, not the money. Something bigger. I'd shattered the story she'd built in her head, that I was desperate, that she'd stripped me bare, that she could walk away laughing. She could still take a chunk of what I had. That was the law. But she would never take the satisfaction of thinking she had broken me. And judging by the look on her face, she knew it. The sound in the courtroom changed after that number dropped. It's strange how something invisible, air, space, can suddenly feel heavier, charged, like it's vibrating between every person present. You could hear the faint shuffle of papers, the nervous clearing of throats, the creak of chairs as people leaned forward to see the show unfold. Olivia didn't move. She didn't blink. Her lawyer tried to compose himself, adjusting his tie, flipping through the documents as if maybe, just maybe, he'd find some way to twist this in her favor. But I could see in his face that he'd already done the math. The figure wasn't just impressive, it was strategic. Months earlier, I'd moved certain holdings, consolidated others, and quietly finalized a major acquisition that I had been structuring for years. On paper, it all looked like I'd pulled off a single, seamless masterstroke at the last possible moment. In reality, it was the result of 100 late nights, 1,000 careful decisions, and the kind of patience Olivia never had the stomach for. The judge continued reading aloud from the summary, each asset like a bell tolling in that cavernous room. A private equity stake valued at a commercial real estate portfolio encompassing liquid accounts totaling. With each line, I could feel her pulse quickening from across the table. Her eyes darted to mine again, searching for some kind of tell, some acknowledgement, some reason she hadn't seen this coming. But I didn't give her anything. Because the truth was, she'd underestimated me the way people underestimate a tide. They think they know where it starts, where it ends, until they wake up one morning and the shoreline is gone. The judge set the papers down. We'll need to recess briefly so counsel can review these disclosures before proceeding. He struck the gavel once, the sharp crack snapping the room back into motion. Olivia leaned toward her lawyer, whispering something urgent, but her voice was tight, strained. He nodded, scribbling furiously on his notepad, as if writing fast enough might undo what had just been revealed. I stood, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the aisle. She caught my arm as I passed. "What the hell is this?" she hissed. I looked down at her hand gripping my sleeve, then met her eyes. "It's the part of me you never saw, Olivia. The part you thought didn't exist." She let go, but her gaze didn't drop. And for the first time since she filed, I saw something other than smugness in her eyes. Fear. Not fear of losing money. No. She'd still get her share. This was different. This was the fear of realizing she'd been outplayed in a game she didn't even know she was in. The bailiff's voice echoed through the room, calling for a 15-minute recess. I stepped into the hallway, feeling the cool air hit my face. It smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper, but to me, it might as well have been salt air on an open coast. Because this wasn't just survival anymore. This was war, and I had just landed the first blow. The hallway outside the courtroom was wide and cold, the kind of sterile space designed to make people feel small. The low hum of vending machines and the echo of distant footsteps replaced the tense buzz from inside. I walked toward the far end, away from the benches where reporters and curious onlookers whispered. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. I needed these few moments alone. The plan had been set in motion months ago. Not just the restructuring of my assets. No, that was only the skeleton. The flesh of it was psychological. I'd known Olivia would weaponize charm, pity, and performance in court. She always had the ability to draw a crowd to her side. But what she didn't understand was that while she was rehearsing her scene, I was building my stage. In divorces like ours, money isn't just money. It's credibility. It's positioning. And the number the judge read wasn't just a measure of my worth. It was a signal flare. From the corner of my eye, I caught movement. Olivia had followed me out. She wasn't smiling anymore. "You could have told me," she said, her voice low but sharp, like the edge of a blade hidden under silk. I turned slowly. "Told you, Olivia. You made it very clear months ago that you weren't interested in my truths. You wanted my losses. There's a difference." Her jaw tightened. "You think this changes anything? I'll still walk away with—" "Half," I interrupted, leaning in just enough for my voice to carry only to her. "Half of a number you can't touch without my networks, without my access, without my understanding of how it moves." She blinked, and for a moment, her bravado slipped. It was small, a crack, but I saw it. Before she could reply, a deeper voice called from the other end of the hallway. "Son." It wasn't my father. It wasn't hers. It was him. Her father, Walter, walked toward us, his gait uneven but deliberate. In all the years I'd known him, I had never seen him look this worn. He'd always been a man of iron in public, a respected figure in our city. Today, his tie was loose, his eyes sunken, and his hands trembled just enough to notice. "Can we talk? Alone," he said, glancing at Olivia. She hesitated. "Dad, Alone," he repeated, his voice final. Olivia's eyes flicked between us. She opened her mouth to protest, then seemed to think better of it. With one last glare, she stepped back into the courtroom. Walter stepped closer. "I didn't come here to choose sides," he began. His voice was lower now, almost breaking. "But you need to know something she's not going to tell you." I studied him carefully. "What is it?" He glanced toward the courtroom doors, as if checking for shadows. "It's about your son," he said. The way he said it wasn't just a setup for some anecdote or harmless concern. Number. This was the tone people use before telling you something that rearranges the bones of your world. My chest tightened. "Go on." Walter's eyes met mine, and for the first time since I'd met the man, I saw tears forming. "She's been lying to you about—" The bailiff's voice boomed from the hall's other end. "We're back in session." Walter froze. The moment shattered. He stepped back, his voice now barely more than a whisper. Meet me after." And then he turned, walking away toward the side entrance. I stood there for a second, staring at the doors to the courtroom. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about Olivia anymore. It was about the one person I thought was untouchable in all of this. The courtroom felt heavier when I walked back in, as if the air had been compressed in my absence. Olivia was already seated, her posture perfect again, mask fully restored. Her eyes followed me, sharp and unblinking, as I slid back into my chair beside my attorney. The judge adjusted his glasses and shuffled a stack of papers. We'll now proceed with the financial disclosures related to long-term assets. I leaned back slightly, letting the moment play out. Every tick of the second hand was a drumbeat in my chest, not from nerves, but from the calculation of how to stretch this tension to its breaking point. My attorney rose and began to explain the structure of my holdings. On paper, they looked straightforward enough. Trusts, investments, equity in various ventures. But the beauty of wealth, if you know how to build it, is that its true power isn't in the total. It's in its architecture. The judge's brow furrowed as we detailed the layers. The companies that own to other companies. The assets stored in jurisdictions Olivia had probably never heard of. And the clauses that made access without my cooperation nearly impossible. I caught a flicker of confusion in her eyes. Good. She was realizing what I had realized months ago. She was going to get her cut, yes, but her cut was a ship without a compass. At one point, her lawyer leaned in and whispered something to her. She stiffened, then glanced at me with something between frustration and disbelief. When it was her turn to speak, she went for the performance again. Tears in her voice, hand clutching the armrest, talking about sacrifices she'd made for the marriage. The same script she'd been rehearsing since the day she decided she was done with me. I didn't interrupt. Interrupting would have given her more stage time. Instead, I waited. My hands folded, letting the silence after her words stretch just long enough to feel like doubt. The judge nodded, made a few notes, and moved us to closing arguments. And then, just like that, it was over. The gavel came down. The decisions were recorded. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked out without looking at her. The hallway was emptier now. The noise from earlier had faded, replaced by the distant hum of the building's ventilation. Walter was there, leaning against the wall near the side door, as if he hadn't moved since we last spoke. He straightened when he saw me. "Let's walk," he said. We stepped outside into the crisp air. The city was alive, but in that small stretch of street, the noise seemed muted. Walter didn't waste time. "It's about your son," he said again, voice lower, heavier. "You think she's been planning this divorce for months. That's true. But what you don't know is she's been planning something else too." I stopped walking. "What do you mean?" He looked at me with a mix of shame and urgency. "She's been moving money, his money. The trust you set up for his education, his future. It's not there anymore." My jaw clenched. "That's not possible. I have oversight on." "She found a way," Walter cut in. "She convinced the trustees to authorize transfers by telling them you had agreed. She used forged documents. And the money? It's gone." The words hit like a physical blow. Not because of the betrayal. By now, I'd come to expect that. But because this wasn't my money. This was his. Walter's voice cracked. "I told her it was wrong." She laughed. "Said she deserved it after everything. And when I tried to stop her..." He trailed off, his eyes wet now. "She told me to stay out of it, or I'd never see my grandson again." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The anger was there, yes, but under it was something colder, sharper. She thought she could burn everything and walk away untouched. She was wrong. That night I drove to Olivia's apartment. Not to shout, not to beg. I had no intention of giving her the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. The hallway smelled faintly of her perfume. familiar, suffocating. When she opened the door, she was wearing the same smug smile I'd seen in court, the kind that said she believed she'd already won. "What do you want?" she asked, leaning on the door frame like she was the one in control. I stepped inside without answering. She tried to protest, but I kept moving until I was in the living room, standing where she couldn't ignore me. "Where's the money, Olivia?" I said, my voice low, measured. She tilted her head, feigning confusion. "What money?" "The trust," I said. "Our son's future, the one you drained like it was your personal piggy bank." Her smile faltered for just a second, but she recovered quickly. "You think I don't deserve compensation after what I put up with? After all the years?" I cut her off with a glance that stopped her mid-sentence. "This isn't about you. This isn't about me. This is about him." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Please, he's 10. He doesn't need that kind of money sitting in some account. I'll make better use of it now." For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I didn't shout. I didn't move toward her. I just let the weight of what she'd said sink in. And then, a small voice came from the hallway. He'd been there the whole time. Our son. His hair was messy, his pajamas wrinkled. He clutched the door frame like it was the only thing keeping him steady. He looked at me, then at her, and in a voice that was small but steady, he said the 7 words that burned themselves into my memory forever. "Mom, you just proved Dad was right." Olivia froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He didn't wait for her to respond. He just turned and walked back down the hallway toward his room, closing the door behind him with a soft click. For the first time that night, Olivia's eyes didn't hold arrogance or mockery. They held something else entirely. Fear. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. I walked to the door, stepped into the cold night air, and left her standing there in the silence she'd created for herself. Because in that moment, I realized something. I'd already won. Not in court, not in the division of assets, but in the one place that truly mattered. And she knew it. The drive home that night felt different. The streets were empty, slick with the glow of streetlights reflecting off a light drizzle. Every turn, every stop sign, felt like a slow exhale after months of holding my breath. I didn't replay her face in my mind. I replayed his. The way my son had stood there, unshaken, like he had been waiting for the right moment to speak the truth out loud. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a while, engine off, listening to the rain tap against the roof. This wasn't a victory that could be measured in dollars or property. This was something deeper, intangible, but permanent. Inside, the house was quiet. I went straight to my office, sat down, and opened my laptop. I logged into the trust account, confirming what I already knew. It was gone. The balance read $0.00. But this time, I didn't feel rage. I felt focus, because money could be made again, and I had every intention of making more than she could ever touch. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. I brewed a pot of coffee, not because I needed it, but because the ritual itself grounded me. As the sun broke over the horizon, I made a promise to myself and to my son that no one would ever rob him of his future again. I called my lawyer. "Freeze every account with her name on it," I said. "I don't care what it takes. Just do it." He didn't ask questions. By noon, Olivia's cards were declining at every store in town. Weeks passed. The town moved on from our very public divorce, but I didn't. I worked. harder than I had in years. And every time I felt tired, I remembered that night, those 7 words, and how they had shifted something inside me. My business doubled in revenue. Investments I had put on the back burner suddenly began to pay off. It was as if the weight she had been holding over me had lifted, clearing the path for everything I had been too distracted to pursue. Then, one Friday afternoon, my phone rang. It was her father. We hadn't spoken since the divorce, but his voice carried the same deep rumble it always had. Except now, there was something in it I'd never heard before. Regret. "She came by the house," he said quietly. "She's not doing well. Says she can't find work. She's asking for help." I didn't say anything at first. He sighed. "I'm not asking you to forgive her. I just thought you should know." "Thanks for letting me know," I said. My voice was calm, almost detached. Before he could reply, I added, "Tell her I hope she figures out what really matters. And tell her, our son already has." I hung up. That night, my son and I sat on the back porch, looking up at the stars. He didn't talk much about what happened, and I didn't push him to. Instead, we sat in the silence, the kind that feels full instead of empty. When he finally spoke, it was simple. "Dad, I'm glad you didn't give up." And in that moment, I realized something. The money, the assets, the court battles, they were all just noise. The real win was right here beside me, and no one could ever take that away. The camera of my life had shifted. Where once the lens had been clouded with betrayal, bitterness, and a gnawing sense of injustice, now it was clear, sharp, and focused on the only thing that mattered. My son's laughter, the quiet pride in his eyes, the way he carried himself now, not as a boy crushed by his parents' war, but as a young man who had seen the truth and chosen where to stand. Olivia's name came up less and less. She became a shadow on the edge of my story. I didn't erase her. I simply stopped giving her the power to be center frame. I poured myself into my work, my health, my home. Little things changed first. Fresh paint on the porch, the garden I'd neglected brought back to life. Then the big things followed. Business expansion, trips with my son, the kind of conversations that bond you for life. One evening, months later, I stood in the kitchen, cooking dinner. The golden hour light spilled across the countertops. My son sat at the table, sketching in a notebook, humming to himself. I thought about the court, the public spectacle, the stinging humiliation of hearing her laugh while I sat there stripped bare. And then, I thought about that moment when the judge read my net worth, the way the room froze, the way she froze. Not because I wanted to gloat, no, because in that instant, she realized she had underestimated me completely. The story could have ended there. A man scorned, reclaiming his dignity through numbers on a page. But that wasn't the ending I wanted. Instead, my ending was here, stirring a pot of pasta while my son talked about his science project, living without the constant ache of betrayal, breathing without waiting for the next blow. Life doesn't hand out clean breaks. It leaves scars. But scars aren't weakness. They're proof you survived. And as I set 2 plates on the table, I knew this was survival. And something more. This was victory. Not the kind measured in court documents or bank accounts, but in moments that no amount of betrayal could steal. I looked across at my son and smiled. "Eat up," I said. "We've got a big day tomorrow." He grinned. "What are we doing?" I just shook my head. "You'll see." The screen fades to black. The sound of his laughter lingers. Title card appears. She laughed through our divorce. Then the judge read my net worth. The audience exhales, some in relief, some in anticipation, and without realizing it, they're already hovering over the next video.